And now I'm going to just introduce our speakers today. We're going to be having a webinar, Driving Standardization Across P2P. It's a case study with Howard Hughes, and our sponsors today were Clearsalting and Coupa. So Gary Werder is currently serving as the Director of Source-to-Pay for Clearsalting. Gary's experience includes overseeing leading continuous improvement projects, strategy, vision, and functioning to drive organizations' efficiency and reduce costs. He has a proven background in strategic planning through thought leadership, and he has a background in organizational structure, development, as well as stakeholder relations. Chris Stang from Howard Hughes is the VP of Finance Operations of the Howard Hughes Corporations. In this role, he oversees the treasury, cash management, and accounts payable function for the company. He's responsible for driving process efficiencies and automation within the organization through the use of technology. His past projects have focused on developing and implementing processes that have created value for treasury and accounting functions. Prior to joining the Howard Hughes Corporation, he was an associate at Oppenheimer & Co., a financial services firm headquartered in New York. Chris has a BS in finance from Miami University. Chris currently resides in St. Louis and is happily married to his wife, Mindy, and they have 3 wonderful children, Matthew, Celia, and Caroline. And I'm going to let them take it away because they're a lot more interesting than I am.
So, thanks. I'll just kick things off again. Glad everyone could join us today. Looking forward to talking about what it takes to have a really strong foundation for P2P, to talk about the transformation journey that Chris Stang and the team at Howard Hughes have been on. As was just mentioned, I have a background across pretty much all elements of the source-to-pay chain, as well as continuous improvement. And we've just been helping as part of that journey. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit more about Howard Hughes.
Sure, thanks, Gary. So yeah, as was said from Nick, VP of Finance Operations of the company, and really ultimately over the treasury and accounts payable functions. What kind of my involvement here with our discussion today is I did lead the implementation of our procurement platform, which we kicked off last year and completed. So just a little bit about Howard Hughes, the company. So we're a real estate developer, owner, and operator, and operate in 6 different markets across the U.S. We essentially operate in a few different business segments, but primarily really within each of these regions, we have what are called master plan communities, which are really just large real estate developments that consist of both commercial and residential retail or residential properties. Part of our business really is we sell land and condos. We also own and operate office, retail, and multifamily. We also have some entertainment and food and beverage operations at our New York property. Can we go to the next slide, Gary? And then, yeah, as I said before, we operate in 6 different markets across the U.S., spanning from New York to Hawaii. And then, I guess going into really kind of what the subject matter is for today is really the case for transformation and why we kind of kicked off the project and what were the needs for us to implement a new procurement platform at the company. So ultimately, what we were trying to do with this initiative was develop and implement a centralized procurement platform that the entire organization could utilize. One thing I'll say is that our organization has a decentralized procurement model. So that does present its own challenges, and we can kind of go into that through the conversation today. But one thing that we were trying to do with this initiative was really have all of that sourcing and procurement activities occur within a single channel within the selected platform that we chose, which is Coupa. Additionally, one of the key initiatives here was to ensure that, well, I guess I'll kind of go to some of the case for it here, but in our previous process, there was really no connection between the procurement function and really our financials. So essentially it was more of kind of the procurement was regarded more so within the legal kind of contracting process with really no connection to the accounting system and the financials. So really what ultimately that meant was that as part of an action to procure goods and services, there was really no sort of budget kind of information that was available or controls within that activity, as well as no ability to really control the amount of contracted spend with a given supplier. So really, it's a matter of really connecting kind of I'd say the procurement and accounts payable functions at the company. Additionally, with the kind of centralized channel, we are looking to also establish catalogs with some of our suppliers, whereas most of our spending was occurring just offline through email or through phones with phone calls with our suppliers, and we're looking to leverage a system to establish catalog spending, as well as what we had were some inconsistent approval authorizations between our procurement and accounts payable functions. Essentially, we had some authorizations that were in place on the procurement side of things, and some approvals that are taking place on the invoice side of things within accounts payable that were really inconsistent as far as the approval levels and the authorized parties between systems. And then really it was really an inefficient accounts payable process, essentially, because there was approvals that were taking place within our kind of procurement activities on the front end. And then effectively those same approvals were taking place, and sometimes differently, as I said, kind of inconsistent, but were taking place in the back end within the accounts payable process on the invoice processing. So essentially duplicative approvals that were occurring due to lack of use of purchase orders. And then lastly, our supplier onboarding process was very manual. We had an internal tool that we utilized, but it was essentially just kept within the employees of the company. So really, again, kind of the offline type exercise where, a given buyer or employee would collect information from a supplier through email and then end up putting through a request internally to onboard the supplier. So another really inefficiency that we had in our platforms.
And I suspect a lot of people are going to recognize, like, this will resonate with folks, that you've got lack of spend visibility or some average spend, legacy systems, maybe with some that integrate, some that don't, diverse set of stakeholders that may or may not be working on the same processes. And then just now with the environment going on with some supply chain fragility, rising costs, et cetera, that make alignment on those even more important. So as folks are thinking through this, Chris and I had talked that there's some keys to successfully transforming the organization. We refer to those as the key success pillars here: technology, process, alignment, data, and culture. So let's just kick off with technology. We mentioned, Chris, you're using the Coupa platform. Why'd you select Coupa? Maybe just describe some of the modules that you put in use and kind of how you got things rolling.
Yep. So yeah, as mentioned before, we did select Coupa as our procurement platform. The modules we're using are the core procure-to-pay module, as well as the SIM module, which is supplier information management. We looked at a few different providers, a few different platforms, and ultimately selected Coupa for a few different reasons. One, from a reporting standpoint, we found that with Coupa versus a couple other providers that we looked at, the reporting capabilities were more robust and I'd say more intuitive as well for an end user to utilize. The mobile capabilities were stronger relative to some of the others, or our organization at least, we're pretty mobile forward and like to ensure that any of our enterprise applications that we put forth has a good mobile platform as well. We liked the vendor interaction that was kind of enabled or supported through the Coupa platform, and really being like the Coupa supplier portal, which we'll kind of go into a little bit further, but really allowing our suppliers to get into the system and engage with us through a centralized platform, really, and also kind of supporting the audit with that as well, where any and all interactions or communications with our suppliers could be facilitated through one channel with the audit trail, as opposed to really operating offline, if you will, and through email and a variety of different channels. And then lastly, I guess, is really from an integration standpoint, there was a lot of pre-built APIs that Coupa had that worked well with other systems that we were looking to connect with. One of them being the ERP system that we utilize called JD Edwards. There's already pre-built integrations with that, as well as there's a sales and use tax compliance system that we use that had a pre-built integrations for that as well. So I think for those reasons here is the reason why we decided to go with Coupa. And again, it was those two modules that we went forward with.
So, sounds good. I know too that part of the considerations for what you're looking at, again, people rarely start with just a complete end-to-end system that you can change all elements at once, or that all regions go at once. So it's flexible, it's scalable, and you can continue as you grow to continue to add additional modules and so forth. I think too.
And I'll say,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Gary, but I'll say one thing though as well. I forgot about, but one thing that we liked is, and again, we as a company, we like to use built for purpose tools and the best in class of those tools, and have them connect and integrate where they can between systems. But that said, we do consolidate where we can and kind of reduce the overall software stack that we have at the company. So one thing as well is that Coupa does offer the expense management platform. So we did think from a scalability perspective, as you say, that over the long term, potentially that could be of interest. We can kind of consolidate our current T&E management platform into this as well. So just another kind of, I guess, example of how we view it as a scalable solution for us.
For sure. So technology is a critical element of success. The process changes are how you unlock the full value. At HHC, the strategy appears to be the technology first as a platform, and then using that to drive the data and process changes. Maybe you could just share a little bit about your thought process there and how you use the technology to drive the true change, free up resources, demonstrate value, and so forth.
Yeah, as I said before, I think maybe I said more that we're more mobile first, but we're a very much a technology forward company. We're always looking for opportunities to leverage technology to drive efficiency within the organization. So actually kind of part of the initial process here when we, went through the kind of the RFP process and prior to that, I guess, really internally to promote the case for going forward with this initiative, we really ran this through what we had internally as a technology task force, as we call it. And this really has representation across functional areas of the company to really, look for needs within the organization and present those to this task force to really identify where we can utilize technology in order to drive efficiency, whether that be within existing technologies that we have at the company or looking externally for additional platforms. So, really with the goal of that being to really ultimately free up internal resources to focus on really greater value adding exercises as opposed to more manual data entry type functions. So not necessarily always really a reduction of, full-time employees, but really a reallocation of those resources to better tasks that are of greater value to the organization as opposed to manual entry. And I'd say also, another key kind of driver, and when we look at these types of initiatives, is ensuring that integrations are kind of front and center with the systems that we look at. So one, ensuring that they're one API focused, as well as have pre-built connections with a variety of platforms, and really allow for a kind of a great high level of connection between systems. So I'd say that those are really two key areas that we look at when we're looking at how do we drive that efficiency internally.
Oh, that's great. So then from alignment standpoint, we talked about this earlier, but this is one of these spaces that touches probably more functions and more towers than almost any other. So you might have finance involved as you are, some purchasing or some business folks interacting with legal, maybe some folks doing master data, potentially sourcing. So a lot of different stakeholders, they can be siloed as well, IT. How'd you work to keep alignment across the organization during the transformation?
Yeah, this was a challenge, but it was something that we ensured there was representation in the project across all functional areas. So really, this is identifying on the front end who are all the impacted parties with this initiative, and ensuring that they're involved on the very front end, and really identifying key individuals or the SMEs within with each of those functional areas to have them involved along the way as we went through the implementation, really from the very beginning on really identifying what their requirements were for the project. And then as well as we kind of progressed along through the project and the timeline to ensure that we had the necessary resources and input from each of those functional areas as we went through the project. So I would say not only just the incorporation of those various functional areas along the way with the project, but also identifying really what would be a kind of a point person, or what we had kind of as a change champion as well within each of those functional areas to make sure that there was alignment across all groups as we went through the project. And where I said there was some challenge is that given that we have kind of a decentralized model on the procurement side of things, that was a little more challenging to ensure that we had that alignment throughout that entire functional area at the company. Given that, one, it's decentralized in the sense of different business areas at our company, as well as the different regions in which we operate. So that's something that I can go into a little bit later as far as lessons learned. But I would say that generally speaking, the way that that we did this was to ensure that all parties that we could identify that were really stakeholders within the project were kept informed along the way as we went through the project.
If I could say too, I think you did a great job of communicating the vision of where it was headed. And then just sitting with people and listening about if they had differences, what their concerns were. Probably also showing some of the quick wins so that they see how it's helping the organization. Because then I heard a lot of people say to you, wow, you guys, I hadn't thought about it that way, or I understand where you're headed, I'm willing to consider changes. And where previously, there might have been some resistance, or, that people understood the rationale of what's the end of this and how it makes the overall better, which was really good to see. So
yeah, and that's
the hardest part, but
I'd say a pretty important thing about what you just said there is really having not just the buy-in across the organization, but really having the messaging come from the top down on what the goals are with this. So, I mean, because we have just previous projects that I've been involved in where that communication really wasn't in place, it's harder to drive that input in from the kind of the testers and people that are involved along the way in the project. Like, what are the goals? What are we looking to accomplish with this, without having that messaging from the top down to really communicate that out? So we ensured that we had through our central internal communications group that messaging go out throughout the project, as well as post our intranet side as well. But first and foremost, really coming from the top down to ensure that there was alignment throughout the organization.
Actually, just on that too, to mention some things that Coupa has within it. There's banners that can communicate things. Chris and his team put things on the front page, links to and tiles that link to things that take you directly where you want to go. There's FAQs and guides that would be included with communications with suppliers, with training materials internally. So you were over communicating to make sure. I think also some lunch and learns or some office hours kind of things when key changes happen, so folks could drop in and drop out, ask questions. That was really effective how you did that.
No, I agree, and that was definitely learned behavior from past projects that weren't communicated as efficiently. But I think we like to utilize a variety of channels. You said namely the banner bar within the Coupa application, as well as having that corresponding with internal comms that go out through email, as well as our intranet site. And then the lunch and learns are always I think a good way to get people to try to come in and participate, because obviously you're getting lunch. That's a good way to encourage people to join. So the combination of those has worked well for us.
Great. So the next one there is data, and I think probably every organization, the first thing they'd say when you come to see them is, you'd be embarrassed. We have some legacy data that's not clean, or as part of a transition, we've got some challenges there, some things, that were incomplete or inaccurate. So, data's rarely perfect, maybe missing policies or documentation. I just asked, you've been through it. What would you tell somebody that says that they're starting with that? Is P2P improvement still something achievable for them?
Yes, it is. It is. And I would say that, so here's an area in which we could have done better in the project. I don't think that we did enough of the cleanup of kind of the more legacy systems or infrastructure before we went live with the system. So I guess that's why I say that it's achievable, because we ultimately ended up going live. We're doing some of that cleanup and have done some of it since post go live, but it would have been much more efficient to have that done on the front end. So I think, yes, it's certainly achievable, but I would strongly encourage those to really look at what are any of the kind of the data or policies that feed into or that are inputs to the overall system or the process, to really take a look at those on the front end to identify if there's really some cleanup opportunity there, which really could be what I regard as more of a prerequisite exercise to do that prior to launch of the project. Because once you go live with something, and I'll just give an example of this, our approval workflows at our organization are not very streamlined, so they're pretty complex. And what that's amounted to ultimately where we currently stand now is that we have a system that's configured in Coupa with a pretty complex, and I know, Gary, you can speak to the frustrations with this, but when we're trying to make an update to a workflow or do something different, given the complexity of the rules that we have within the system, it proves to be a pretty difficult exercise. And now we're going to have to essentially kind of relook at how those workflows are set up and kind of unwind what we have and put forth a new structure. Whereas I would have much preferred to have that exercise done on the front end before we kicked off the project. It would have been much cleaner and efficient that way. I'd say another area as well is from our budget data perspective, there were some, I guess, inaccuracies in our source system to really getting that feeding into Coupa that we should have kind of cleaned up prior to go live. So I guess really the short of it is as I said, it's certainly achievable, but I would strongly encourage really a deep look at all of the inputs that feed into the platform, whether it be from a data perspective or whether it be from like a policy perspective, and ensure that's cleaned up as much as possible before the project's kicked off.
I would say a lot of the things that are put in place as part of the new process keeps incentivizes things being right the first time, tries to reduce the opportunity for error, and so it just gets much cleaner. There's crisper workflows. There's ensures that suppliers have complete and accurate information that's consistent with requirements downstream, such as 1099 reporting. That just everything flows more cleanly. But as you mentioned, the earlier that you can start and the earlier that you can, the more data that you can get under control, even the legacy data, just the more effective it is. You mentioned one thing about having pretty complex workflows and a lot of views. So that's a really nice transition to culture. I would say one thing I noticed is the culture had been one of extreme precision, where budgets matched to the penny, where things were really tracked very carefully. So aligning to the culture is a really important part of the effort. How have you kept the organization engaged, and kind of how have you approached sort of change management from that perspective?
Yeah, I think that goes back to really that messaging that we've had from leadership, and really ensuring that gets communicated throughout the project, really with what are the key deliverables or goals that we're looking to achieve with this initiative, just to ensure that all parties are aligned. And I think, as I mentioned before as well, from a change management perspective, we did have identified really a group of change champions across functional areas and regions to help with the overall effort. So really, I think it's just a matter of keeping those parties engaged and ensure they have a clear task that they each have to ensure that their respective business segments or regions are kept in the loop and aligned with the goals of the project as we go throughout. But yeah, as you said though too, from a culture perspective, I mean, there's certain things from that precision as you bring up, and that's, I think, things that one of the items we're going to look at from a more of a optimization standpoint now that we're live in the system is that does it make sense to allow for some tolerances there? Because I think that we may have, we have a zero tolerance type policy on dollar amounts from a purchase order perspective or from a budgetary perspective, and you're talking about an overage of a very small dollar amount. What is it worth to have that restrictive controls in place? Is it really a value add for the organization? So those are additional things too that now we've gone live in the new system, and we continue to look at how we can utilize it and leverage it better. That'll hopefully drive some cultural changes in the organization too, to allow a little more flexibility there.
Sounds good. Every organization has them, just from their different histories or their different industries. So, you guys also stood up a change management office that you've put in place, a PMO, architecture change board. I think those have been really good too, to not only make it formal, but allow folks to influence and to make sure that everything is aligned with their expectations and requirements as well.
Totally agree. And some of those that you bring up, though, those were different groups within the organization that were initiated kind of mid-project. We didn't have the full value of that towards the beginning, but as we've progressed along through the project implementation, is really the post-go live kind of hypercare phase, really seeing the value of having that formalized structure in place. So like one from the architecture review board, which from a change management perspective, that ensures the kind of alignment across other stakeholders in the organization when new changes are put forth. And then separately, as you said, which I would have been a great value that if we had that earlier in our project, but the PMO team, which really was built out or introduced, like I said, mid-project, to really ensure that the project stays in alignment with the timelines and that all interested parties are engaged throughout. We obviously have a reliance on our implementation partner to do that, but I do see there's a significant value of having your internal PMO team as well to pair up with the implementation partner.
That makes sense, and that's a nice transition to kind of talked about an evolution. It's been a journey, so let's just touch base on kind of how you've approached over time and the philosophy. Maybe as you kind of walk through it, just talk about any key learnings like that as you went. Like one of them that you just described is, hey, at one point we recognized that change management office would be really helpful as part of this. But yeah, why don't you just kind of talk us through your thoughts there?
Absolutely, and I think on that one too, and I'll just speak a little bit further to it. And every organization is different, and but I think what we've had previously, and this has been through multiple software implementations that I've seen, but prior to that PMO function at the company, we've really kind of relied upon, well, like I said, our external implementation partner, and then internally from a project management standpoint, it's really been on the business to manage that. So that's challenging. One, to take on the task of having your day job, your daily responsibilities, as well as the involvement within a project. In a business area that's not your bread and butter, it's not as efficient as obviously as having a dedicated function to do that. So that's certainly a key learning that we've come away with, and I'm glad it was introduced. But I certainly think that's something that many groups, especially if you have several different enterprise applications at the organization, to have that type of function. And I think, again, kind of what you said before, same with the change management, two separate things, but really having core or dedicated areas that really focus on those parts of a project. And I would say kind of along, one thing I'm just thinking about as well is that I think I also spoke to, but I think we could have had some better engagement across regional leadership at our company. So I did say that we've had that top-down communication, which is good, but towards the front end, I think we didn't have as much engagement at our regional level, and I think that would have done well for us in the overall project if we had done so. I think another thing too, and I think maybe this somewhat goes without saying, but I think just in hindsight, it's something I certainly think about, is that we just should have spent more time on the front end process, really kind of during the RFP process, to ensure that all of the requirements that we had were fully gathered and were properly analyzed during the product assessment. As an example of where we kind of fell short there is that we originally actually had the CLMA module included in scope as part of the project, and that's the contract lifecycle management advanced module within Coupa. And really what we were looking to do with that is take our legal contracting, authoring, document execution process out of what was in Salesforce and bring it into Coupa and have it into one platform. Due to our not fully and properly assessing the product on the front end during the RFP process, we essentially moved forward with selecting Coupa as our I guess platform ultimately from a CLM perspective, and then mid-project kind of found digging further into the details that it really didn't fulfill our requirements in the way that we thought it would. So mid-project, actually, we de-scoped CLM and chose a built-for-purpose CLM tool to then which will ultimately integrate with Coupa once that goes live, which is planned for Q1 of next year. So yeah, I would say just to make sure that there's more investment done on the very front end before the project kicked off. So one, what I said before was the kind of the data cleanup side of things. In addition to that, is really understanding that the requirements are properly gathered fully on the front end. And then I'd say lastly too, and I think just an important part of it, and I think this is a good thing about the technology task force that I had identified previously, is to ensure that when something does go through a new project is being assessed as to whether or not that it's something we're going to kick off and go forward with, that any and all corresponding internal resources have been allocated, and not just financially, but from an employee perspective, that the time allocation's there and it's available before we kick off the project. So that was something that was very important, because we did identify from an IT integration standpoint there was a fairly sizable amount of resource requirement for that, but I think we kind of underestimated it a little bit. So I think it's a very important part on the front end to ensure that any and all internal resources that are going to be required for the project are really kind of outlined in the front end and allocated appropriately within the project plan.
Definitely, and I know toward the tail end of a project, you can start to lose those resources. I think that's really wise. So one of the things just shown here on the screen was, again, to the extent that you can do the investment in the process in some of those redesigns, being as thoughtful as possible up front. There's always some things that are missed, or there's always some requirements that people didn't realize, or maybe even new functionality that comes out that people would like to leverage. So that optimization of the existing processes and strategy that's listed up there in 2021, this would be all I'd like the workflows adjusted in this way. I'd like these users added. I'd like to change who can see certain content and creating new roles and so forth. There was a lot of effort there and ended up with really substantial reductions in cycle time, to the point where folks are getting all their questions answered very quickly. Do you just want to touch on that period of time a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I would say in this kind of side of things, I guess this kind of goes to what I spoke to a little bit before with the kind of the change in scope, but is being able to be agile as the kind of the project is underway, as well as once the project goes live, and to be kind of responsive to how things develop as the project develops. So one obviously is a change in scope to be able to be nimble and kind of adjust accordingly as things change, not only from like our own internal like scope of what was included, but as well as like new functionalities are introduced which has occurred on a few different instances within the platform as you're working through the project. But as well as kind of, as I said, as you're getting feedback and trying to, and I guess this is what I'll kind of shift over to with that, is to ensure that you're properly pulling in feedback from end users as you go live. And I think what I would say about that too is really highlighting the importance of the hypercare period. And I think that's another thing that we had is that we really underestimated how much may be needed there. And that's actually how we engaged here with Clear Salting, is through really this extended hypercare period. But I think we originally had it set for, it was either a 30 or 60 day hypercare period, which was certainly not enough. So to adjust for that, we engaged Clear Salting to really help us out with that overall effort. So it's one thing to go through the requirements gathering, have the interested parties involved in the process go through the UAT testing, but not until you really get everyone in the system, or you're really going to identify some of the areas that require adjustment. So by engaging Clear Salting and having additional bandwidth, we're able to really better address those adjustments that were needed along the way in a variety of different areas of the configuration, as well as really act as additional bandwidth too for our internal employees who are really trying to kind of operate and do their day jobs, as well as try to support the needs of all of the new users coming into the system that required support. So I'd say another item with that as well is to ensure that there's on the front end too, even before the project's kicked off, or at least it's being planned, is to what extent, well, I guess clearly identified, where does the application support live? And is there enough resource that's available to do that? And ensuring they have the proper training to ensure they're an efficient support resource. And for us, we ended up engaging Clear Salting to kind of extend that bandwidth and act as an interim solution until we build up our internal resources to provide that support. But that's something I certainly think another thing that we should have, in hindsight, should have put more focus on the front end to ensure we had those internal resources available. But yeah.
And we can give folks just a high level. So we would take a look at, for example, together as metrics. Folks had talked about the types of tickets and characterizing the tickets as they came in, the severity, the complexity, and so forth. Hey, how do we make the integrations flow more smoothly? How do we make the budgets update more accurately? How do we decrease the cycle time for processing invoices and improve the first time right? One other one you spent quite a bit of time on too is just focusing on how to engage with your suppliers. Do you just want to touch on, you've given that a lot of thought?
Yes, yeah. And I'd say, and this actually comes from past experience as well, in a different type of scenario, but leveraging how kind of what we learned from that, I kind of kept that in mind with what we're looking at here with the Coupa deliverable. But we did have a virtual payment card program that we implemented years back that really didn't take into account the kind of the supplier experience as well as it should have been. And as a result, the implementation did not get very smooth, and it took some additional time of ramp up to really build up the program to what it could be. But I think thinking of that, it was really ensuring that there's a focus on our suppliers and the experience that they'll have with dealing with us as we go through with this overall platform. So, I mean, we want to ensure that it's as seamless as possible for them, and that when they conduct business with Howard Hughes, that they know it's to a high standard. And at the end of the day, too, I mean, part of the ask of what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to shift over some of the responsibility of where we have someone within our accounts payable function or anywhere within the business, frankly, for that matter, that's taking receipt of an invoice and we're processing it through our internal system as it was previously. We're trying to shift over some of that responsibility effectively over to the supplier to submit that directly into the supplier portal. So we are asking more of the supplier than simply sending an email or even through the mail for that matter. So I wanted to ensure that what we have is a as streamlined and seamless as possible for them. So it's not something that they'll push back on, and ensuring that we can kind of move forward in our areas of driving efficiency in the organization. And one thing, kind of looking ahead a little bit on this one, but well, I guess one thing as well is, I think, as far as kind of a hindsight, is I wouldn't discount the effort to engage suppliers as part of the process and getting them enrolled in the Coupa platform. There's certainly a lead time with that, and ensuring there's a dedicated resource is what I found is essential on driving that change. It's pretty, I think, pretty important to do. One thing that we're putting forth now is we're developing an external facing, really supplier support site for suppliers to really, more of an FAQs, to really kind of with videos and help guides to just to help them navigate Coupa and deal with any questions, really primarily more so from a new supplier that's being onboarded, but really make it as seamless as possible for them, and with a point of reference, and end of the day, reduce the amount of support required from our internal people to help them navigate the system. So yeah, for those reasons, I found it to be pretty important to focus on the supplier experience.
Absolutely. And I would say too, just that focus on the suppliers and the ability to communicate with them through the portal and get information quickly. You can incentivize the payment methods that make sense for both. The compliant information that allows all the downstream things to happen, protecting proprietary information, just closed loop too, that there are fewer opportunities for errors and everybody knows where things stand, which that alone, answers all the noise back and forth. You and I have joked, but we try to make this process boring. It just happens right the first time and people don't even have to think about it. So
yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. With that, we're going to take some questions. And so I'll open it up to the moderator who's been, Nick, you've been collecting those.
Yeah, no, we have a bunch of questions. So I'll start with, we won't transition it too far because we had a few questions come in relating to suppliers. So one theme that came through the questions were just, how successful are you guys at Howard Hughes at getting suppliers to use CSP for uploading invoices into Coupa?
Candidly, right now, it's not been very successful. I don't have a percentage at the top of my head of where we currently stand right now, but kind of what I was going to just a few minutes ago is really highlighting the importance on the front end. And that's where it's a little bit difficult as well, because you can communicate out in the front end and try to kind of get that on the prior to going live, but it really has to be coordinated with when the actual go live date is, because you're not going to be operating the system obviously until the go live. But so it's going to be an ongoing process to get them engaged in the system. So I'd say that the percentage at this point is pretty low, but I have a dedicated resource now that's working solely on getting suppliers engaged in the system. So we'll see over time as we progress, but kind of as part of the journey, I guess, that we've gone through with this, there was certainly the change. I don't think I mentioned earlier or not, but there was a change for us to really, we were consolidating invoice processing that was occurring in multiple systems into one system, and we were changing the process for that. So there's the kind of the change management task at hand to get solved for, and that's what we've accomplished at this point. We've gotten all these different parties in our organization into one unified system, which is a win in itself. But we're really not leveraging the system yet in the way that it needs to be to really drive the value to the organization. So that's kind of where we're shifting to now, is more of the kind of optimization, if you will, phase of it, of the project. So yeah, I think to me, the initial hurdle was the getting all employees in our new system and operating in a more consistent manner. And then second to that is the enrollment of suppliers. So that's ongoing, and I'm hoping to be able to, down the road, coming in the months ahead, speak to some significant gains on percentage of suppliers engaged. But as I said before, that's why I think there's, in kind of going through it as we have right now, having the importance of having that supplier experience is as seamless as possible is very important, obviously, to drive adoption there. And that's kind of a part of the reason for that external site that I referenced.
Here's kind of a nice approach that we've laid out that I think could be replicated with a lot of folks listening. Is we took a look at both activity level in terms of invoice processing as well as spend. So we targeted who were the most important people that we would like to convert, and bounced it against, there's a vast Coupa community, and Coupa can provide the data of folks that participate in those portals and participate with these invoice programs with other customers. So we targeted them first. Hey, who are the folks most impactful, and which of those people already do it with someone else? And so Chris and his team, prepared the invitations, just have the new forms ready going out to those folks. And so, you're going to see a huge increase right away. I think it was just several hundred suppliers out of multiple thousands, but several hundred suppliers account for like 60% of the volume that they're targeting here in even the first month. So that's about to go out. That's where they are right now.
No, that definitely makes sense. And that kind of perfectly transitions into the next question on adoption. So people are wondering, how are you dealing with the knowledge and training for your admins and for the users that are going to be using Coupa? And then what are you going to do when error messages come up? How are they being trained to deal with those? And then I guess on top of that, which categories did you focus on? So who are the users that are focusing on these tools?
Yeah, so it's really all users within the organization, in the sense of any parties in any way dealing with the procurement of any goods or services or utilizing the platform. So that's across the board. So there's nothing that goes outside of that. As far as the kind of the administration function support within the system, and that's where I spoke to a little bit before, I think, is that ensuring that you have on the front end that proper support group internally and identifying that early on. So we're still trying to catch up a bit in that regard. We've had our administration users trained up through the Coupa certified training, so that's taken place. One thing I think that's maybe a little bit more unique about our organization, which we're kind of shifting over, and I think which is the right approach, is that we have a little bit too much ownership of the administration of the system within the business, as opposed to really more within the IT support function. So we have our enterprise applications group that we're looking to build up and really transition some of that administration over to. So we're actually in the process of the knowledge transfer right now from our the resources within the business, if you will, in my group, and transferring some of the ownership of some of those admin related tasks to them. So we're actually about to meet on that in the coming weeks. So identifying really kind of where's the separation of roles within that, because I know there's still going to be within each of the respective business areas, within procurement and accounts payable, there's still going to be an administrative user that's like kind of in the business, so to speak. But it's kind of sharing that responsibility and identifying where does the IT enterprise applications group kind of fit in within what support they provide. So that's kind of an ongoing process to transfer that knowledge. But yeah, it was initially done through the Coupa certified training, and then with some of those parties we're training the other parties internally. And then as far as kind of the ongoing support, we leverage an IT, this is really across the organization from a software application standpoint, but a ticketing management system. And I think that's a very important task, tool to think, at least from my standpoint, on properly managing, because kind of one, I think, as Gary spoke to before, you're able to categorize the kind of nature of different types of support tickets that are coming in. And it really helps to better train up our resources accordingly to kind of meet the needs of the organization. And it's much, much easier through the use of a ticket management system.
I think too, an important element of that is there's some judgment or some triage about whether something is a service ticket or it rises to the level of a project, and the team will assign it accordingly, based on people's skill level or what they can manage. I'd say one other thing that you did is you created, and really smart, is a master data owner. Not every organization does that. It falls in a weird space because there's usually a customer master data, there's a supplier master data, sometimes item master data. But just investing resources there has been really valuable. So that's another admin role, but that can really be helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. And that also perfectly brings us into that next question. I know you kind of touched upon it, but Do you guys have a purchasing center of excellence where the P2P is going to reside, or is that something that you're planning towards in the future?
We're planning towards in the future, actually, on that one. So we actually, I think I did say that we don't really have a centralized procurement function. So it makes it more challenging to try to put something in place like a procurement platform as you'd expect without having that centralized function. And effectively what it's been at our company is it's been to a degree owned by legal, which sounds probably pretty strange, but the contracting process to really execute a procurement contract is owned by legal. So it kind of in effect, some of the policies and procedures kind of dictated by the legal team has really kind of impacted what the initial procurement function looks like. So what we're doing now is we're creating really a procurement group with representation really at each of our regional offices and our corporate office as well. So that's something that's on the radar right now that we're planning for. I think that'll help kind of bridge the gap, if you will, between kind of our legal process and what they're involved in, and really the people who are involved on initiating buyer type activities, by having kind of like really a dedicated, procurement individual at each office. So yes, that's something that we're working towards right now.
I think what's pretty typical, what folks will see is initially there's an enabling technology, there's standard policies and procedures that get in place. You eliminate things that probably people shouldn't be doing. And then you make a decision now that everybody's doing the same thing, does it make sense to like leverage one center, back each other up, good separation of duties, that kind of stuff. So I'd say that's where it is on the continuum.
Awesome. And then I know we only have 5 minutes left, so I'll wrap it up with everybody's favorite type of question. So there was a few questions surrounding ROI. How are you guys measuring it? How often are you measuring it? Do you have any stuff going on there, Chris?
Yeah, I admittedly right now the ROI doesn't look good, but that's because again I kind of like looking at this a little bit phased. And just to say for our perspective, by the way, as we did kind of the kind of cost benefit on the front end of this, for us it was more of a reduction in labor hours required internally and really driving the efficiency. To really that would be the value for the organization, and not as much on the more, I guess, consolidation of spend within suppliers and maybe leveraging maybe the Coupa Advantage partnership as well. So that to us is a little more secondary. It was more primarily on the kind of efficiency gains in the form of a reduction in labor hours required internally to kind of complete our process end to end. We're not at a point now where we're getting the value, but I think as we've already talked to before, given that percentage of supplier engagement is pretty low right now, as we're shifting over into what I kind of labeled as the optimization stage, I think that's where we're going to start transitioning over to where we are realizing the value. And I do think we're going to get there. It just, to me, it was the initial hurdle of let's getting all employees into a new unified system. We've achieved that. Now let's drive the value. So not there yet, but I'm hopeful that we'll get there over the coming months.
Yeah, I would say too, what people often see. So we'll set aside there tends to be some benefit that you could do from an FTE side and efficiencies in investing those folks. Typically, cash flow is a pretty big one. The leveraging of spend and the controlling of Maverick spend. And then just control of some of the other leaks that are in the process, as well as for some businesses, just a better user and external stakeholder experience can be pretty powerful too. So,
well, I should have mentioned that, Gary. Yeah, I think that one already, as far as the control that we have in place, I mean, we're already seeing value in that regard. So I failed to mention that, but that's absolutely an important one.
No, that definitely makes sense. And that's something that we see across a lot of these big digital implementations, that it's one step at a time before you get to really reap the rewards of it. But that's definitely great to hear. And that kind of brings us to our last question in terms of timeline, Chris. So when you were getting into this project, what was your perceived timeline? What is that timeline looking like now? Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the timeline it extended. And it's much greater than what we originally anticipated, to be honest. Yeah, we kicked off the project in 2020, and not to make excuses about it, but it was during COVID, and it was not a great time to start an implementation. We had also at the same time we were relocating our corporate headquarters. We had a kind of internal transition that was being done in leadership as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. So I guess the challenge of bringing kind of new employees on in an unfavorable time, as well as having totally remote working with our implementation partner, proved to be a little bit challenging. In addition to that, the change in scope along the way really extended it out. So again, we did kick off the project in, like, I believe June of 2020. We went live in October of 2021. So I think now, as far as kind of what my timeline looks like, so obviously that's the timeline that it took to implement, which is greater than what we originally anticipated. But kind of now our secondary phase of really optimization, I'm really looking at kind of more of we're now a year in since we've been live. I'm really hoping that the primary focus of the remainder of this year, and even throughout really 2023 as well, is really getting to the point where we're realizing the value of the system. And one of the things that we're kind of doing or tracking towards right now is where I think I mentioned before that we were really not utilizing purchase orders at our company, and there's a significant inefficiency with not doing that. We are trying to transition to really being a majority PO-backed invoice processing beginning with the start of next year. So I think that's going to start driving a lot of efficiency as well. So I guess to answer the question, I'd say that I'm really hoping that, you know, by this time next year, towards the end of next year, that we'll be at a much better position from a value perspective.
I would just say too, that feeds into, and we have a perspective on touchless procure to pay, but when you have a purchase order, you can have the supplier submit the invoice, flip it in the system, they automatically match. Just leveraging all these things that before couldn't be leveraged will really make it more efficient.
No, awesome. And we're coming right up on 2 o'clock. I don't know if either of you guys have any final things to say before we close things out today.
Nothing from me.
No, just thanks for everyone for attending. Chris, I just want to thank you for all your insights and knowledge there. And just mentioned in the attachments, there's some additional reading and an ebook and a blog that are really good references.
Thank you all for coming. And if you were scrambling to take notes, keep an eye out for your email next week. You're going to be getting a recording of all this. So if you missed anything, you're able to watch it again. Thank you all for taking the afternoon with us.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.